You must have anticipated, after all your years of looking at this and reviewing the case law and looking at how to do this, you must have known even when the minute you heard that Owen was arrested, not so much about, oh my God, my baker's in jail, but
oh yeah, this was
is it.
Yeah. Oh, I knew it.
Okay, welcome back to another edition of Cannabis in Canada with Jason Wilcox. I'm here today with none other than Ted Smith, and we're on Vancouver Island, and we're enjoying literally the hospitality, myself being able to see my old friends, being able to see Ted's partner Gail, and being able to just have a good time enjoying the island, and most importantly catching up with Ted and some of the work that he's been doing. Ted, welcome to the show.
Thanks, nice to be here.
Nice to be medicated too. Thank you for having us out here. You've been a gracious host. And getting into this, I mean, I've interviewed Owen, and we've profiled Owen on our show about R versus Smith. And of course, that's what this interview is about. It's going to be R versus Smith. What I'd like our audience to know more about is...
And Smith being Owen Smith, not Ted Smith.
Ted, that's correct, Owen Smith.
No relation.
and the history that this goes back to, because of course Owen Smith ultimately became the case that is now headed for the SEC, and we'll get into that. But let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
So where did it start for you with extractions and your introduction to baking goods?
Well, I'd never really seen a pot cookie or anything like it growing up in Ontario. And when I came out here, I moved to Victoria to start hempology and educating the public. And one of the first things I was hearing about was medical marijuana. Down in the States, Dennis Perron had just started up the Cannabis Buyers Club down there, the first one in the world. And I met this woman who made cookies and brownies and salves for the skin. And it really blew my mind away. And when I got to know her, she volunteered in the AIDS community, eventually for every nonprofit in Victoria. But her and her partner both sold pot and sold these cookies and brownies and stuff, pretty much to anybody, but they preferred it, you know, to people that were sick that needed it. And so I got to meet a lot of her clients, and it was amazing. People with AIDS that smoked cannabis seemed to be able to maintain themselves, whereas this was in the fall of 1995. Many now might not remember or know, but AIDS was at a sort of epidemic stage at that point. People that were being diagnosed with it were dying within a year at times, and the drugs weren't working. Often the drugs were making them sicker, and there was just these cocktails that were experimental. It was really sad, and so for a lot of people, the smoking pot helped them keep alive, but if they ate the brownies too, or the cookies, they'd start to feel better. They'd want to go back to work and live again, you know? It
improve their quality of life, I'm sure.
So it was at that point that I decided that I needed to start the Cannabis Buyers Club and provide these products to people that were sick that otherwise would have absolutely no way of gaining access to them. It wasn't really just about the pot as much as it was even the alternatives, because let's face it, Victoria could get pot. That wasn't really a big problem, at least for the average person.
Well, BC in general, I think that's the case.
But it was more like that these people needed access to these products because they had benefits that at the time we didn't even know of. Now, this was before the endocannabinoid system was discovered. You know, and a lot of what we've learned today really wasn't known. The only thing that was really known, aside from AIDS being discovered, sort of, was that it was good for cancer. And then it was thought that it will relieve the nausea. Well, it gave you the munchies. Well, everybody sort of knew that you got the munchies. So yeah, it helped with the chemo, cancer, nausea from cancer. So that was about the only real known medical or accepted medical benefit of it. But all of a sudden, the AIDS epidemic really created this wave of interest in it because it helped prolong and help, you know, save a lot of suffering.
And for a lot of my viewers, I don't often talk about the fact that I am 21 years HIV positive, and I lived through that particular era where people were indeed dying. I was told I had 6 months to live. And There wasn't a lot known, of course, about the endogenous system, the endocannabinoid signaling system. All that information was not there, but what we did know was that if we medicated with edibles, we wouldn't throw up from the treatment we had to take to stay alive.
Yeah.
And I learned that. That was my introduction to medical cannabis.
Yeah.
And you guys were pioneers yourself. Hillary in Vancouver, Mr. Lucas on the island, everybody was pioneers in making sure that there was a service provided for medical patients before we even really knew what the true empirical evidence was.
Yeah.
Like it does say it could exist today.
There's a real desperation because people were dying so quickly and were so ill that it was like they didn't have time to wait for the law to change. You know, so there was this real drive for me to make a change like that, you know, for people that it shouldn't be expected to make the change, you know, and you're really sick with cancer and AIDS, it's hard enough to eat, let alone.
No, we're talking 1990.
So this is 95.
95.
So it was not, January 96 was when I started the club and got the pamphlet. So like, it was the fall that I got, and it got in my head, this is what I got to do. These are the people that really need it. And I also knew at the time that I was going to get busted a bunch of times. I had no, you know, I guess, illusion that I wouldn't get arrested. I'd moved here from Ontario basically in a backpack. I started my club and everything in a van, got a pager and a pamphlet, and I figured I'd be arrested several times, change the law, get a store, start a nonprofit, and, you know, walk away.
And that's what I want to talk about, because that's the Ted Smith that I want to talk about, because it's a man behind the activism, your book, the years of stuff, and of course we're gonna have that flash shot.
I have my book here.
Well, you worked so long.
I'm kind of like looking around, but oh shit.
You worked so long. You worked so long on this book. But what I've always looked at, and going back to the earliest days, is the people who laid the foundation. Because we're talking about, again, 1996. Did you say?
Yeah.
Okay, so 1996. For our viewers out there, they know there was nobody laying it down, and you were out there championing it and taking the chance and saying, "Go ahead and arrest me." And not only that, you were pushing it even further into the university, into the higher learning.
Yeah, I'm skipping over my hempology work, really. That's what I moved to Victoria for, was to educate the public and write my book and, you know, really focus on, you know, I guess the theme was legalization by education. You know, the more people knew about cannabis. And this was when hemp was illegal too, right, in Canada. So, you know, just absurd, the state of the law. So there's this real urge for me, you know, more actually as an environmentalist. I got into it more because I'm a 7th-generation farmer on both sides in Ontario. So I got into it for hemp and to try to, you know, stop the erosion of the environment by this mass corporate and raping of the planet. So it had nothing to do with patients, just kind of came through the back door. And then all of a sudden, you know, I started having sick people come to me and needing help. And
so as you learned that patients were getting like antiemetic relief from cannabis, and you were saying, "Holy cow!" and you took this risk and laid that down. The activist side came out. You've been known to challenge City Hall. You've been known to get in the face of the city police chiefs in Victoria.
Well, certainly. This is a very political issue, and I've tried to avoid being a politician, even though I ran for mayor once. They were raiding my club all the time, so I thought I'd probably end up in jail, but I may as well run for mayor at the time. So anyhow, yeah, so I started making appearances to City Hall on November 15th, it started anyway, every year. And the second year, I actually waved the marijuana salve in front of City Council, thanked the police for their policy of non-harassment, of which there was no policy. But I made it sound like there was.
Speaking of which, now for our viewers, now people who may not know what a city proclamation is, Mr. Smith is one of the first people to get a proclamation to operate his cannabis dispensary until the federal government could get themselves in gear. And you held that proclamation for how many years? Oh,
we still get it every year.
Oh,
Since 2002, yeah, it's like 12 years. Well, you got to renew it every year.
Yeah, but it's still
so we declare International Medical Marijuana Day every year. The city does, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
There you go. So there you go, and that is again another historic piece of your activism that you've done. So now back to the extractions. Now you met a baker that started to teach you a little bit more. Maybe tell us about that and how that changed it.
Well, you know, for the first few years, I went from the van to an apartment, so I had this pretty steady place. I lost the baker and then started making my own cookies, which many refer to as pucks. They weren't really the tastiest things, but they could medicate you. And then, but I didn't feel it was enough. I guess I felt somewhat protected that they weren't going to bust me doing the club because I was just helping sick people, and I had lots of undercover cops coming in with phony information, either half-assed medical information or not ID or whatever. So I really screened it so that they couldn't get in with an undercover, and felt pretty safe. But I realized that more needed to be done. So one year I thought on International Medical Marijuana Day to have a cookie giveaway. So downtown Victoria in the public library, I gave out 101 pot cookies, and got reported in the media. And there's actually a little bit of reporting beforehand, enough to get lots of people there. And there was even a cop stand in the Victoria courtyard, in the library courtyard, watching kind of across the foyer area. And when the reporters asked him why I wasn't being arrested, he actually told them that when THC is cooked, it gets neutralized and they can't test it anymore. That's what he said. At least that justified not arresting me at the time, right? But I was on the front page of the Times Colonist and got some great press for it. Michael Timchuk from CBC Radio won awards from the radio show or the little news program that he made about it. So it was really, you know, it had a great impact in bringing awareness about it, and to me, kind of, you know, opened up this loophole to think, oh, like, if they don't think they can arrest me for it. So, you know, instead of doing a pot cookie giveaway every day, I waited till the next year and made 420 cookies to give out. And there's a lot of people waiting to come get pot cookies, including the police. One of the funny parts of the story is, I know I had 420 pot cookies. I worked really hard for 4 days. I double counted, there was 420 cookies. I was convicted of 383 cookies.
All right.
The 37 cookies went missing in the police station. And they've treated me better ever since. So no, it's good. It's good. They've learned. They're not mean to me anymore. Yeah. They just want more cookies all the time. One thing
Owen said in the interview I did with him was that he got the rock star treatment because, you know, the officers knew who Ted Smith was because of your years of activism.
We get treated with great amount of respect by them at times. They just have to do their job sometimes, right? So, yeah. Anyhow, so I got arrested. I think it was the week before that, up at the university at a 420. So I had a couple trafficking charges because I got arrested for sharing. Trafficking is sharing, if you didn't know that. But I know you do, but anyway.
Well, yeah, no, that's fair. No, but we should tell the viewers officially, when even like Ted and I right now, as part of passive civil disobedience, activists always share, but we know we're trafficking.
Yeah, I can make this joint legal. I'm a criminal. I don't have no legal permits to do nothing. But yeah, up at UVic at the 420, sometimes I'll light a joint and tell all the students I'm going to make this joint legal, and then I'll call someone over with the license and go, here.
I remember that actually back in the day. You know?
It's a fun trick. Anyhow, so I had a couple charges on me, and then a couple months after that, the police tried to arrest me in my apartment. Couldn't get a warrant. The Justice of the Peace wouldn't give them a warrant, but they arrested someone else in the apartment that was selling pot, a friend of mine. And they basically told me to go get a store at that point, which I did. And it's a lot easier to get a warrant in a store. So that's sort of what happened one way or another. We got raided in January 2002, and then again in March, and then again in June. And then the final one was February 2003.
And just so our people understand, our viewers, is that when you get raided and you open up the very next day, is what's fundamental to keeping the club open. And this was when there was only 2 or 3 clubs in BC, you know, and these are the clubs that laid it down because they made sure, like Ted did, that somebody opened up the very next day.
Yeah, and we did. Sometimes even just after the police left, we did. You know, so we've never been closed for a single day because we're open Christmas and all that too.
Just so they understand, like when they hear that you got, how did you get raided after raided after raided? It's like, well,
we were driving us into debt, so that really sucked. All the raids were driving us into bankruptcy almost, and that's when I ran for mayor and all that stuff. Anyhow, yeah, and then at the same time, I had several growers. I think there's 3 growers going through court at the same time too. Spending a lot of time in court. Anyhow, the first trial of the Buyers Club came up first for whatever reason, and I could explain, but I won't. It's a long story. and I was acquitted of all charges. The second trial came up and I got totally sucker punched in a way. There's charges of cannabis resin on the file, but I thought it was going to be in regards to the hash. They actually dismissed the cannabis charges and all the evidence with smoking materials, including the hash, but proceeded to convict me for selling cannabis resin for the food and the skin products.
The same charge they gave Owen?
No.
Similar? No?
Cannabis resin, not THC.
Oh no, he was THC and you was cannabis, but then...
So I'll get to this, because this is like, you know, this is part of the whole evolution of this, because initially, when people were charged, and this goes back to the watermelon case, because Dr. David Pate and John Conroy were the team that dealt with a woman called Watermelon who sold pot cookies on Wreck Beach in Vancouver. And she had her charges thrown out.
Check out Pot TV if you don't know who she is.
Yeah, she's amazing. She had her charges thrown out because they charged her with cannabis resin. Dr. Pate proved there was no resin in the product, so you can't charge someone with cannabis resin if you can't see the resin, because it didn't. And so the charges got thrown out. And so at least that's a summary of the case. And so anyway, the judge basically ignored that decision and just read the MMAR as it read strictly, that you know, dried marijuana only, and convicted me. I was so upset at my lawyer and everybody else that I did the entire appeal myself. I barely even asked him for how to do it, you know, and I made a whole bunch of mistakes, but I didn't care. I wrote the entire factum myself. When the Department of Justice read my factum, they realized I at least had some arguments significant enough to garner a new trial at least, if not an overturned decision. So they decided to pull the plug and not go ahead with it. I'll never forget being in front of the 3 judges at the Court of Appeal when the Crown said there was, you know, going to be no trial. And I was like, no, I want to go ahead with the trial. We have to go ahead because these are outstanding issues that need to be resolved before the higher courts. And if they just drop the matter now, then there won't be strong binding decisions over this matter. And they're like, well, the federal government's given up. Your charges are dropped. You have to walk away. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll be back. Don't worry. And so, and then along the way, my cookie giveaway trial came up. And because Watermelon's case, and we called up Dr. Pate as evidence, or to be the expert, they actually changed my charges from cannabis resin to THC. They just kind of switched it over because they knew I was going to.
It did evolve into the same charge then as Owen eventually.
Yeah, they've evolved their charges that they've used, because with the Watermelon case in particular, they realized they can't use cannabis resin for cookies. Right? That's not going to stick. But THC, they just got to prove that it's there, right? And I tried to argue that there was so little THC in it that it would meet the requirements in the hemp regulations, because we cooked it so much. It was just this bad leaf in the beginning, and then we put it in this flour and eggs and all this other stuff. So it was like really low amount of THC, and that it was, you know, and so, but I had a jury trial for my pot cookie giveaway. I had 5 days in court. It was a great circus. We were in the news every single day.
Great circus. And so,
seriously, man.
To our up-and-coming activists out there that want to know how to become a good activist or how to get more engaged, then some of this stuff is the frontline activist stuff that you do, and with that also comes the rubber sandwiches that a few of us get.
If you accept you're not going to go to the United States again, you got no worries. Like,
well, you know, on that note, that's kind of trippy. Now, 10 years ago when you and I worked together, would we have ever thought that here we are now talking about the U.S. The U.S. is now legalizing all around us, and in a free and fair market, while Canada is allowing Marijuana Inc. to move in.
Even by the time we get a Supreme Court decision here, we could have a federal government wanting to legalize it. But anyway, the cookie evolution. So yeah, so I was actually convicted by a jury of trafficking THC for giving out pot cookies. I was given a day jail sentence, which just meant I was thrown in the pen for a couple hours while they processed me, so I didn't actually do more time.
I did a night in jail. That's the rubber sandwich I'm talking about. Rubber sandwich and cold coffee.
Yeah. So, you know, it's the sort of thing, you know, you got to accept your lumps, but ultimately it was more than worth all the press that I was able to get in the media and the attention that was brought to the use of cannabis as an edible product.
Is it fair to say that that is what in essence protected your club as you grew, and then for many years after that, and in your continued activism, because you initially engaged them, said I'm not going to back down, and met them at every corner?
Yeah. Oh, that's been a big part of it. And we've been really friendly with the police when they do stuff too. Like, you know, we don't get angry or whatever. It's like, oh geez, what are you doing with that warrant? Like, you know, come on guys. You know, it's not like we get upset or they pull out their guns or anything like that.
And that's something we very much...
I've become pretty good friends with some police officers.
We very much teach this in passive resistance, is also to be polite to officers. As much as we may not like what they're doing, is to be polite and just exercise your rights, but certainly not become aggressive or expect, you know, you be aggressive, they'll become aggressive. And it's just kind of not, I've never really seen that. What I'm proud of is the fact we can have 20,000 people come together and with extractions, with any kind of cannabis, any kind of flower, and not have any violence. You know, that's what it, but you know, it's a little off topic. I mean, I'm just kind of bouncing things around here because it's all going to loop into this whole story.